Presenting the saga of the stolen door. To be young and filled with mirth and rage. I was 14 at the time. 14 was not a good year for me. New town, new house, new school to adjust to, and that's not even counting the complications of being an undiagnosed autistic teenager. Puberty. You think you're finally catching up, and suddenly there's a whole parade of shiny new developmental delays to widen the gap between you and your peers. Nostalgia. Point is, it was a difficult year for me and my two siblings, so when April rolled around, I decided, quite magnanimously I thought, a sign of benevolence of character and all that we all deserved a good laugh. Well, that was one version of events. The second version of events is, my siblings and I have spent the year driving each other up the walls. Up the walls, through the ceiling, past the colony of attic-dwelling dust bunnies, around the rafters, and straight to cracking our skulls under new roofing tiles. It is within realms of possibility that I figured some payback was in order. So with April Fools on the horizon, my thoughts turned to my youngest sibling, Claire. Names changed to protect the mostly innocent. Claire stood out as the most appropriate potential volunteer. The person best suited to assist with holiday celebration planning. Please note this had nothing to do with the fact Claire was the youngest, she was also the scariest, and everything to do with the fact that, over the last month or so, the majority of ear-splitting, migraine-inducing household arguments had featured her and Mom in starring roles. This is not to single anyone out, we all took equal turns on the rota. I had more than my share of top billing. Hypocritical? Perhaps. But at the time, I thought I was really quite inclined to do something outrageously annoying in general, and particularly annoying to Claire specifically. Here is the third and final version of events. The three of us slept in bedrooms that opened into the same little hallway. Claire was in habit of playing music, on speakers, loudly. For someone who played a lot of Panic at the Disco, Claire was surprisingly unfamiliar with the concept of closing the goddamn door. Ever. That goddamn bedroom door was never closed. It sat there, ajar, mocking me, licking out music and malaise. And I lived right down the hall, a few feet away, me and my sensory issues and my autistic, always nervous system. Some nights I dreamt of rainfall, rivers of blood, torrents of skyfire, tumbling down to cleanse the soils and sins of this sinful, soiled earth. I concede that the music might not have been that loud, okay? But it seemed loud to the tired gremlin flailing around, trying to regulate all the bright flashing buttons and levers out of the sputtering control panel inside my rotten little skull. At some point, our household bedtime routine began to include arguments, enthusiastic debates about headphones and volume and just close the door. You know, business as usual. Sibling business. And then suddenly, it was almost April. And this worming, squirming, giggling thought entered my frazzled mind and made a home there. Well, it's not like she's actually using it. And thus the audacious doorkeeper of April manifested into my bedraggled, maleficent mind. The thing about the house we were living in at the time, it was weird. It was a weird house. Rooms with too many corners, windows shoved in bizarre places, old flourishes of grandeur. The doors, for instance, the doors were tall. The ceilings were perfectly mundane height, but the doors were unreasonably elongated. I might, of course, be biased. Prior to this point in time, I was not given cause to go about critiquing doors. They opened, they closed, they slammed, occasionally, when household theatrics demanded it. But it never occurred to me just how goddamn big they were. And I don't know what those fuckers were cowed out of, but holy shit, they were heavy. Vaguely, in the back of my mind, there was an assumption, a presupposition, a faint speculation, if you will, that most doors are hollow. I can confirm this with research. Most interior doors are indeed hollow. I told you this was a weird house. Sadly, Claire's bedroom door was not, in fact, at all hollow. I discovered this in media res, as it were. Specifically on the 6th screw. I made a number of mistakes, which I will now reflect upon in painful detail. 1. It did not occur to me, at the time, to Google how to remove a door. This, it transpired, was a grievous misjudgment. 2. If I had taken 90 seconds of my day to Google how to remove a door, the very first result would have informed that, by far the best and apparently most obvious method of door removal is to simply remove the hinge pins. This easy-peasy pain-free method involves smoothly slipping 3 pins out of place. This is not the method that occurred to me. I was distracted by the screws. Two facts. 1. The hinges were held on by screws. 2. I had access to a screwdriver. The little gremlin that sits at the control panel of my brain reached out its grubby gremlin fists and grasped those two small facts like a toddler gleefully grabbing a hold of the ears of a depressed basset hound. The door had 3 hinges, 8 screws apiece, for a total of 24 screws. Yes, I did exactly what you're thinking. I can hear the concerns you are physically projecting at my past self, and please know they went entirely unheeded. I pilfered a screwdriver, I waited until the house was empty, and on the afternoon of March 31st, I set to work. Granted, I only had to unscrew half of them, but each one was 3 inches long, which feels absolutely endless when you have to yank 12 out of a wall in a row without the assistance of power tools, while a 100-pound slab of lumber creaks ominously at your side, and also you have the patience and hand grip strength of a borderline decrepit teenager. Truly, my regrets are countless and unaging, and thus unencumbered by the soothing balm of cruel but guileless time. In my defense, the door should have been fucking hollow. It occurs to me, in hindsight, glorious, alluring, unobtainable hindsight, that if one is determined to go about removing a door in this manner, there is probably a correct order in which to remove screws from a door frame. I did not choose that order. I am all about simplicity. I went from top down. In mechanical physics, there is a physical property called torque, which enables an object, a door for example, to exert a surprising amount of rotational force, the gravitational weight of said door for example, around a specific axis of rotation. A door hinge, for instance. I think perhaps you can infer where I am going with this line of narration. Remember how I said the door was fucking heavy? Second hinge, 7th screw. That's when it happened. To my complete and guileless horror, the weight of the door began, I shit you not, to pull the remaining hinges out of the goddamn wall. In that moment of ice-frozen terror, I did, I think, what any other scrawny and spite and Adderall-fueled teenager faced with the imminent catastrophe of restricted internet privileges would have done. I looked into my hollow little head and discovered panicked instinct. That is to say, I applied an immediate, equal and opposite rotational force. Sadly, the most efficient, only fucking solution that came to my mind was to jam my innocent, utterly blameless sneakered foot under the door edge. Given my very recent discovery that this cursed fucking slab of sullen lumber weighed more than I did, I do not count the experience as one of my most treasured memories. Second hinge, 7th screw. God damn you to the gasping maw of hell. And I had been so pleased with myself up to that very moment. Well, the bruise healed eventually. It bought me time to desperately reattach a few screws and stabilize the situation, and yes, also tear a few fingernails in doing so. After which, I had some decisions to make. I could have abandoned the whole endeavor. What is one more secret shame against an ocean of ignominy, against rolling infinitudes of self-loathing, lurking in an unspeakable past of contempt and dishonor? I had at this point recently graduated middle school. Alas, spite is a siren song that drowns out sorrow at the cost of good sense. I got beach towels. I wedged 2 solid inches of cotton beach towels into the gap between floor and door. And it fucking worked. The screws came off, the door came down, and I would argue it all worked for the best. Because if it hadn't been for those towels, I absolutely would have scuffed up Mom's wood flooring, resulting in a point of contention that would surely haunt the house like a petulant poltergeist for years and years to come. So, mission accomplished. Not bad for a twiggy adolescent with no muscle mass or cognitive planning abilities. Except now I had an armful of 100-odd pounds of bedroom door and no fucking way to transport it. At this point, it may have occurred to some of you that I am not much of a planner. I'm a big picture thinker. This means that I tend to jump into things with a vague game plan and the attitude that everything will work out in the end, because I am a protagonist and that is what I demand of my storyline. This has led to a surprising amount of positive, or at least dramatic, outcomes, but usually only after an unnecessary expenditure of time, energy, and anguish. This was one such occasion. I had, in the back of my mind, assumed I would hide the bedroom door in the garage, since the garage was a hodgepodge of unpacked boxes and was one of the last places my sister would look. One detail, our bedrooms were on the 2nd floor. The garage was down a flight of stairs. 28 stairs, precisely. To reiterate, I had just discovered that the door in question weighed approximately 5 to 7 times my initial estimate. I have many sterling qualities. The ability to adapt to unexpected circumstances was not, at this point, one of them. I was tired, behind deadline, and above budget. In pain and injury. I was perhaps not thinking with astounding clarity. I had 150 pounds of bastardized mahogany precisely balanced on a pile of beach towels, and the vague remembrance of a life sweeter and richer than the one at hand. I had misery in my heart and pounding in my head. I carefully, very carefully, flipped the door clockwise on its side, wedging in additional beach towels as needed. Then I began to scoot the monstrous wooden headstone towards the stairs. Then there was more flipping and some awkward tilting, because of course the stairwell was situated in an awkward little cut of a corner of the hall, and yes, I ended up tearing my second favorite pair of jeans. But eventually, I got the bane of my current existence propped up like a seesaw at the edge of the stairs, with some creative interpretation of the universal laws of physics, which in dire situations are really more of suggestions than ironclad laws. I managed to slither around the banister and get right beneath the door, where I promptly grabbed onto the bottom edge and dragged. Again, I am not a planner per se, but I managed to get down about 5 steps. At this point, I was met suddenly and with great prejudice with forces beyond my control. Gravity, most pressingly. I could not control the slide of the thing, was the issue. I very abruptly found myself halfway down the stairs, whilst realizing, with all the alarmed dignity I could muster, that I did not in fact want to be down the stairs after all. I backpedaled like a canoeer who suddenly finds themselves riding a waterfall in the least preferable direction. Somehow, it worked. I have no memory of how, exactly, or what gods or devils I might have called upon in those hateful moments, or what spiritual debts I might have incurred. I'm sure I will meet them one day, and have some fast talking to do. Whatever the cost to my shriveled soul, I got the goddamn door back up the fucking stairs, so help me heaven, so help me hell. Which put me right back where I fucking started. Actually, well, not quite. I had to get the door off the last step and onto the floor. Because of the constraints of earthly matters, i.e. walls, this required standing the accursed thing upright on the very top of the stairs, whilst I stood sandwiched between 150 pounds of lumber and a 28-step incline. I want to point out that I do, against all odds, in fact have a terrific sense of balance. It comes, I think, from a lifetime of using the edge of reality as a jumping rope for funsies. I like to think that what happened next is not a reflection on my character or moral deserts, so much as a heavenly oversight, an angelic administrative error, fate sneezing at an inopportune moment, the carelessness of lax and absent gods. Also, I was tired and sweaty and in a state of tormented heartbreak. I stumbled. Very slightly. Barely a stumble. The slightest misstep. Just a toe out of line. Of course, it came at the very instance when 10 toes were all that stood between me and a downfall both literal and literary enough to rival the tragedy of Icarus. That is to say, every toe was needed. What followed was a moment of violence that echoed around the world, ricocheted off of a brick wall, bounced back like a feral tennis ball thrown by the arm of Zeus himself, and beamed me straight in my hubris-inflated ego and forehead. Some would say I fell under the weight of my own arrogance. Personally, I blame gravity. Gravity and 150 spiteful pounds of processed tree fiber, which, for the record, is much heavier. Dear reader, let me snatch back my words. Earlier, I compared my tale to the tragedy of Icarus. This was not wholly accurate, because you will note that Icarus' primary tragedy was that he was an insipid little bitch who couldn't get his act together. Icarus never caught himself mid-fall. I, however, was a better class of person, teenager. Less defeatist, perhaps. More spite-fueled, certainly. More arrogant, conceivably. I would argue this arrogance was justified by what happened next. I have tried several times to use language to convey the exact series of tableaus which transpired. Words fail me. Instead, I chose to download multiple art apps, spend 30 minutes discovering I couldn't locate the eraser tools, delete said apps, and download a different app made for children ages 3 and up. Then I produced this magnificent creation. Me regretting my sins catching up to me. I am not actually an artist. I spent 2 hours drawing this. It belongs in the Louvre. Suffice to say, I caught the motherfucking door. No, I don't remember how. It was the emotional equivalent of discovering mid-air that your seesaw is missing a very integral set of screws, and then watching your body, compelled by the survival spirits of a particularly acrobatic ancestor, presumably of the ape variety, leap into the air of its own accord, do a double backflip, and with supernatural grace landing daintily on both feet in the nearest sandbox without disturbing a single grain of sand. That was the emotional equivalent. The physical equivalent would have been more along the lines of watching someone trip on their own feet and stumble briefly before regaining their footing. Also, I stubbed every single toe in my possession. Anyway, after the great fall, minor stumble, I found myself right back down the stairs, more or less exactly where I started. It is only now, years later, as I write this, that another myth comes to mind. That of Sisyphus, doomed forever to roll that punishing boulder up and up the mountain. I would like to point out that Sisyphus was also a little bitch. Seriously, friend, at some point, you gotta stand up for yourself and, this part is crucial, stop pushing your boulders. I had not yet reached that point, possibly because standing up for myself would, at this moment, entail an argument with gravity. I had very recently lost just one such argument. I was not eager to pursue another. But by the stars I was close. I decided to make one final attempt. If yet again the door preferred to continue its journey to the ground floor, that was where we would part ways. A strange partnership ended at long last. On an unrelated note, based on personal experience, I can guarantee that Sisyphus spent a lot of time crying. Don't you dare judge him for that. To resume our narrative, I very gently and very carefully, without scuffing the floors, Mom, if you're reading this, I did not scuff the flooring, played a strange game of rotational chicken with the door, wherein I got closer and it backed away, rightfully suspicious of my motivations. And eventually, we ended up back where we started, at the top of the stairs. See figure 1 above. The whole experience could have been much worse. The door was, miraculously, unscathed. I was very much scathed, and also, at this point, scathing mad. Spitting fury, the wrath of angels sipping out of me like fumes. The devil took a vacation to Georgia in case I came a-knockin'. There was a lot of scathing going on, is the point. And I was also in no position to actually do anything about it. I was physically unable to throw a tantrum, due to a prior engagement with the forces of physics. I was very, very close to crying, but didn't dare risk it because I needed my eyesight to avoid tumbling down the stairs all over again, probably this time with an inevitable splat. Also, I had an impending migraine. But more importantly, I had the fucking door. I had 30 minutes before Mom got home, and the previous stumble had knocked loose from my skull possibly a few molars, but more significantly the very obvious and readily apparent valuable knowledge that the laundry room down the hall had a little attic that was in fact the perfect storage location for a whooping great, mammothly gargantuan, morally atrocious solid oak door. I delicately adjusted my sneakers, throbbing, resituated a few beach towels into pertinent areas, and off we slid. An interesting detail is that Sisyphus was actually the inspiration for whichever schoolyard bully coined the childhood endearment Sissy. Not many people know or believe this, but I insist it's true. Let us skip ahead. Let us get past the tedious pushing and shoving of the door through the hallway. Past the lopsided progress fueled by exhaustion and incandescent fury. Past the door becoming entangled once or thrice in the banister railing. Past the very slight damage to the wall plaster that my mom still doesn't know about, so please don't tell her. Past the new bruises on my nubbly embittered knees and the new stain of disdain imprinted on my soul. Past all of that. To set the scene, it is hours later. The door, the miserable fucking door, is safely stashed in a little attic down the hall. My mom is home. My sisters are home. I am wallowing in misery, relaxing in bed, cuddled up to an ice pack that I will eventually attempt to duct tape to my foot. This will work so successfully that I will then attempt to do the same to my knee, forgetting that leg hair exists and leading to yet further regret. Wretched regret. In short, all is at peace. I am waiting for the eruption. At any moment now, Claire will notice that her bedroom is missing a pertinent decorative feature. And oh, the fury when she does. Oh, there will be screeching, there will be raging, the walls will shake, and I will laugh and laugh and laugh and laugh, because I am 14 and tomorrow is April Fool's Day, and I have shed my own blood and tears on this caper. I am going to laugh myself sick. So, I am in my bedroom, waiting. I am all a-tingle with anticipation, giddy with adrenaline, frozen with anxiety, numb with exhaustion, and also my fingers and toes are experiencing a weird pricking sensation, but that's probably the undiagnosed anemia. My exhilaration is indistinguishable from my panic, because I know I'm about to get in trouble, but the amount of trouble hinges on the mercurial moods of a temperamental household. I am unknown and unknowable, surrounded by mysterious beings who consistently fail to appreciate a punchline. I am probably in a lot of trouble, but also I am too amused and annoyed to care. I am both bored and on the verge of hyperventilating. In short, it's been a fairly normal Sunday. I sit there and wait. And I keep waiting. All through the early evening. All through dinner. All through after dinner TV time. Then I go to my room and open my laptop and spend a few hours fueling my teenage internet addiction, all while waiting for the other shoe, steel-toed presumably, to drop. My sister has been home for hours. She is in her room, playing music too loudly. On any other day, I would yell at her to close the door. But not today. Today, I wait. Eventually, she turns the music off. Eventually, the hall lights go out. The house descends into darkness. I sit there, in the dark, stunned beyond comprehension. She didn't notice. My sister didn't notice that I stole her fucking bedroom door. This is not altogether surprising, in hindsight. The whole thing only started because she refused to keep her door closed. I even remember thinking, I bet you wouldn't even notice if... Sometimes I despair being so wise and right all the time. Still, I spent a good few minutes lying in bed, biting my nails out of pure fury. Because how dare she? After all my hard work, I nibbled at the hangnail until it bled. Eventually, I got a hold of myself. Actually, it was good that you hadn't noticed. More than I could have hoped for. Tomorrow was April Fool's. Claire would wake up on April 1st, and in the cold light of day, realize what whimsical jest was afoot. Magnificent timing on my part, truly. I woke up early for once in my spiteful little life, my bones creaking with mounting anticipation and teenage growth spurts. I dressed quickly and sat in a dark corner and rubbed my hands together cartoonishly and cackled and cackled and cackled. But quietly, so as to not wake the house. Oh, the villainy of it all. Ah, the waggish mischief. Truly neither Pan nor Hermes nor all the trickster spirits of yore, not fairies nor spirits nor the god of charlatans, Bugs Bunny himself, had ever achieved such fiendish perfection, so pure a moment of jesting bliss as surely awaited me in but a minute's time. Any minute now. I waited with what I assumed was a smile of mischief and malice gripping my features. Reduced as I was to a greening maniac, a madman possessed by the sadistic spirit of suspense, the promise of incipient mayhem. Nothing happened. In the rush to get to school, Claire just didn't notice the door. So we went to class, we came home, we had dinner, and went to bed. And still, nothing. This went on for 3 days. I could not describe to you the philosophical exhaustion I experienced over those long, unending days. The overwhelming psychological itchiness of arrested anticipation. The mental toll of being so excited for the climax. The accumulation, the payoff of all of my pain and planning. Only to receive nothing. Nada. Zilch. And complete shortage of fucks given. She didn't notice the door. Or, more pressingly, its absence. Finally, on the 3rd day I rose again, exhausted, fatigued, a torn plastic bag adrift in the breeze, a worn whoopee cushion deflated into a piteous punctured balloon. Another day found me defeated. By school, by puberty, by family dysfunction and the powerlessness of youth. And one glittering purpose in my life, vanishing like a flame dying in cold wind. Not a glimmer left in my eyes. All my hopes, all my joy, my every raison d'etre, carved and thrown like a spear towards this one shining moment, all my happiness pinned to this one denouncement of bliss, and always, always, the universe conspires to defeat hope, to drain away joy, to siphon off all sweet promise out of every golden bleeding day. Well, actually, none of that is true. By the 3rd day, I had completely forgotten about the door. I was bored of the entire thing and was busy reading webcomics when it finally happened. It came. The scream! Some often-quoted idiot once said there is no sweeter sound than the sound of one's own name. This person was, as stated, an idiot, but also presumably a lucky idiot, who never had a peaceful afternoon interrupted by the eruption, to rival even the bellows of Mount Vesuvius, of the echoing death knell that is hearing your name howled from the lips of an incandescently pissed-off preteen who just discovered her bedroom door was missing. It was like death themselves had materialized behind me, bones creaking with the weight of time and lies, and in a gravelly voice from beyond the grave darkly whispered my name in my ear. Like that, but much louder. It went like, "Dead name!" Ah yes, the sound and fury we were all waiting for. It was my dead name, both in the sense that I later changed it, but mostly because the way Claire said it strongly implied that I would soon be dead. I would like to say the walls shook as my sister's rage echoed through the house. I would like to say the very timbers whimpered, and the doorbell winced in sympathy, and a few loose shingles shook off the roof and flew away south to warmer pastures. I would like to say all that, so I will, because no one can actually prove it didn't happen. I went to meet my fate with, I would say, an admirable degree of dignity, with stoic acceptance and fortitude of spirit. This effect was slightly marred by the fact I was laughing my ass off, or about to be. I must have been holding my breath, poised to burst like an overzealous party balloon, because I remember making it down the hallway and seeing the glorious look of unadulterated rage on Claire's face. The fury of 1,000 suns, at which point I completely fucking lost it. Also, Mom was there, unamused and despondent. I kneeled over laughing, right there in the hallway. Claire was probably still yelling at me, but if she wanted me to hear any of it, she'd have to wait until I stopped cackling like a frothing maniac. Oh, it was glorious. I was in actual hysterics. I couldn't breathe, reader. I wept with laughter. With every grasping breath, my madness grew as I experienced joy. Joy! Joy as lesser mortals shall never know it. Joy so all-encompassing as to be transcendent. Joy that lifted me away from this sullied earth and all its doomed clowns. In one gleaming moment, I ascended to a godlike plane and stood bare and beholden to the sight I beheld, to the golden glorious truth laid out before me. Reader, in those moments, I was gifted the true meaning of life and death and the great cycle of all that was and all that will ever be, the ultimate knowledge sought by fools and philosophers synonyms alike. The universe whispered her secrets to me like a lover murmuring a lullaby, humming to fill in words long forgotten, and I looked at the universe tenderly in the eye, and I laughed. The next day I woke up with a sore ribcage, and I am 90% sure it was from the laughter and not from what happened next. There comes a time when all souls must pay the piper. When our debts and our sins and our collective bar tabs come a-knocking at our door. The devil is an accountant who keeps a perfect tally, and heavenly and unholy debits alike will all one day be paid in full. And on that day, our accounts will be closed and our ledgers wiped clean. Amen. Never, never forget this. When I finally stopped laughing, I found myself cornered on all sides by an annoyed mother, an avenging angel wrapped in all wrathful 5 feet 4 inches of my sister's form, and a rudely solid section of wall. Odysseus, trapped between the monstrous 6 heads of Scylla and the raging whirlpool of Charybdis, faced greater warmth and welcome than I. In those moments, received from my beloved kindred, no one else was laughing. It was then I realized, fool that I was and remain, I had unwittingly cast myself to play yet again the excruciating role of Sisyphus. In all my plotting, scheming, and hatching, all my blood and tears and sweat spilt like rain, like the first flood, in all my stages of grief and elation, it had somehow never occurred to me that I would have to put the door back. Oh, you thought this was the end of the story? This is the middle of the story. Everything that happened before now happens again. In reverse. Except for the stairs bit, I did not have to drag the door up the stairs again. And this bare modicum of mercy is the only reason I survived long enough to bring you this tale today, snatched as it was from the flaming, laughing jaws of hell. I will not force you to relive my anguish. You would enjoy it too much. Suffice to say, my mom took pity and helped me drag the door back down the hall. She lectured me the entire time, but I only ended up stubbing the toes on one foot, so it was probably worth it. Also, 150 pounds of lumber didn't fall on me this time. Small blessings. Somehow, we made it through the hallway intact. And then, of course, we had to replace the door screws. Reinstalling the door, it transpired, was a far more difficult task than removing it to begin with. Dramatic irony is a brat and a motherfucker. And if I ever meet the 3 Sisters of Fate, I will swallow their stupid shared magic eyeball like a delicious gobstopper. So there. And I hope I fucking choke on it and the gods have to gate crash my autopsy to retrieve it. Mom helped me because she had to, but it still took us another forsaken half hour to prop the fucking door up steady enough that we could realign the screws. It kept swaying, goddammit. It was like trying to put the little paper circles back in the paper holes after you've just gone through the trouble of using a hole punch. If the hole punch also fought back and maimed you in the process. I pinched my fingers in the hinges, there was a little blood, there was a lot of yelling, and then just resigned bickering. It was a process. A process that could have been a fuck of a lot faster, but Claire refused to help at all. No. Claire just stood and watched. Nope, that's inaccurate. What Claire actually did, and years later, years down the line, she still points this out, so loud and gleefully every time the story comes up. What Claire actually did was make a big bowl of microwave popcorn and then just sat there in her fucking hammock chair, munching on her fucking popcorn and enjoying the fucking show. And do you know what that little shithead, what that godless devil child, that avenging mistress of demons, that fiend of fiends and magnificent unfeeling brute of a sister of mine, do you know what she did after Mom and I finally got the door screwed in, and we tested it to see if it closed straight, and I, in a fitting end to this whole accursed saga, briefly but vocally smashed my fucking fingers in the door frame? She laughed.